Now, the ANC's NEC is still locked in urgent meeting in Irene, Pretoria. The meeting was called following talks between ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Zuma over the weekend. Ramaphosa was expected to table his report on his meetings with President Zuma, which will then be debated. That followed the cancellation of another urgent NEC meeting last week after the ANC described Ramaphosa and President Zuma's meetings as fruitful and constructive. However, President Zuma is still in office. This as pressure mounts on the newly elected ANC leadership to recall President Zuma, who has so far refused to resign. Let's go now to our political reporter, Aldrin Sampear, who's live at Irene for an update. Aldrin, thanks very much for joining us. We're into the 8th hour now. They've been at it all day and a lot of this evening. What do we know? How far are we?
Well, certainly marathon talks here at Irene as we wait for the ANC to make the announcement on President Jacob Zuma's future. But of course, we know that the ANC has already taken a decision that President Jacob Zuma must stand down as president of the country. But we are still waiting for that announcement to be finally made. And of course, whether President Jacob Zuma will be making that speech. You know, I was just looking through social media, people saying, when will that come? When will President Jacob Zuma be live on TV? When start with his speech, quote unquote, fellow South Africans, and then take it from there, what will happen? But of course, quite importantly as well, would be, should President Jacob Zuma eventually decide to stand down as president of the country, who then becomes the interim president up until we have the elections in 2019. And as you just mentioned, of course, that we have the opposition parties who are saying that the elections must happen immediately after President Jacob Zuma has stepped down as president of the country, and only then must a new president be elected. The opposition parties have said that they want the country's electorate to be part of deciding who should be the president of the country. But also the other thing is that if you have the CR17 camp, those who have been campaigning for Cyril Ramaphosa to become the president of the ANC, they are saying that it's him that must become the president of the country, taking over from President Jacob Zuma. If he does that, then who will become the deputy president? And that's another conundrum. Some have been saying that President Jacob Zuma have been arguing that it should be Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma who becomes the deputy president of the country. But whether that will happen, it's certainly something that we need to sit down and wait for. And of course, it must be something that's debated currently in this NEC meeting.
Talking about debates, Aldrin, if these talks were fruitful and constructive, why are we 8 hours into this NEC meeting?
Well, certainly, if it was fruitful and constructive, I don't think that we'll be standing here. I think a decision would have been taken a long time ago. And I don't think that the president of the ANC and the president of the country would have had another meeting. I don't think that the ANC's top 6 officials would have had another meeting this weekend as well. And there wouldn't have been this urgent NEC meeting that would have been called had the meeting, the first meeting that President Jacob Zuma had with Cyril Ramaphosa, had that meeting be constructive and fruitful, we wouldn't be where we are at the moment. And it certainly does point to a President Jacob Zuma who still has influence and power within the ANC, and there's certainly that pushback within the ANC from those who are saying that President Jacob Zuma must finish his term as president of the country. And this has been something that has been argued even before the ANC's elective conference. Those who have been supporting President Jacob Zuma, saying that he was elected back in 2007 as the president of the ANC, and in 2014 he was the presidential candidate of the ANC, and he must finish his term in 2019, and the ANC should allow him space to do that. But there have been those who have been arguing, and if you listen back to that the sound clip of Paul Mashatile, the Treasurer General of the party, who said that they've made it clear to President Jacob Zuma that he must go. But of course, the president has asked them, what is it that I have done wrong? And some people have been saying that since the last NEC meeting, where there was a push last year for President Jacob Zuma to stand down, and that was quote-unquote defeated, as Fikile Mbalula has said, what has changed since then? Because President Jacob Zuma has heeded the call from the ANC's elective conference that there must be this commission of inquiry, for instance, in state capture. What is different since then?
Aldrin, that's where we'll leave it. That's our very own Aldrin Sampear, who's outside the gathering of the ANC's National Executive Committee, and they're deliberating on the future of the head of state, President Jacob Zuma. We'll keep you posted as those developments unfold. Meanwhile,